Erik Lawyer, that is on a new kind of rescue mission, a mission to help humanity shift from fear-based to heart-centered social, there you are, Erik, economic systems. Seeing the world as metaphorically burning, Erik is bringing wisdom from the fire service to help co-create a new model that puts different types of organizations on the same team and helps them share resources and revenue. So you call yourself a social systems healer and hacker. So, and it's great to see you because we're all part of the same team. I guess everyone watching is. So, but you know, what you're doing is really important to reorganize the monetary economic system so we can have a fair economy for all people to really engage in their creative incarnational form. Just like Stephen Halpern, he's devoted his life to his creation, and that's why he rises to the top. There's a chance for all of us to do that if we have a reformed economic system, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And taking it even, it's great to see you guys, and it's an honor to be here. This is great, and thanks to Neil too for putting this on for all of us.
Yeah. We could talk a little bit about the evolutionary leaders and then go into your thing, which what do you want to say about the evolutionary leaders?
Oh, I love, Diane and Deborah are just amazing with it's their kind of their baby that they've brought forward, and it's helped me step up my game too, because they really embody it. Like the last two of what they call them advances now instead of retreats, the last two advances, they've really put together in a way where it's the whole team really owning their own pieces. And what I really love is just the energetic transfer that happens by being part of that organization.
Right. People like Deepak Chopra,
Neil Donald Walsh, I think.
Marianne Williamson, Lynn McTaggart. These are all great minds coming together, including these two right here.
And the idea is to be the fire of light, the glowing brilliance of the future, to see the options that we have to make a momentary choice, a choice that will set humanity on a higher path, rather than looking over our shoulder at the downward spiral, which is always going to be there in the periodic chart of the elemental change. But we are to be catalyst of change, alchemist of spirit, and shall we say shepherds of the heart. And this is what your work is all about. And we salute you for the great work that you have exhibited and shared with us.
So go into like what you see as a new formatting of the whole economic system.
Yeah, thanks for that invitation. And I would say it's more than just an economic system that I'm focused on. So to give you a little background, my dad was a cop in LA. My mom was a high school principal in LA. So I grew up really trusting authority and seeing pretty, what I thought were great examples of it. And then I became a firefighter. Actually, first I tested to become a cop. I went through college and wanted to follow my dad's footsteps and be a cop. And that moment I got hired, I hadn't told him this. And the moment I got hired, he called me up and let me know that it was time for us to have an honest conversation. He said, all these years I've told you, first, congratulations about getting hired. And he said, first, I want you to know that all these years I've told you the cool stories about being a cop, but I haven't told you the truth. And in a nutshell, what I think is important to land here is what he helped me see was that in the police department as a whole, as he stated, is corrupt to the core. And I was like, no, Dad, I've been a firefighter and or been a paramedic already. I work with a lot of cops. He goes, don't kid yourself. I'm not talking about every single person. I'm talking about the control system. And what he helped me see was, he said, whenever you have power over people, you're going to have corruption. So he helped me see that cops and military, which he was both, have their common, quote, enemy is people. So they're designed to have power over and use force and do whatever is necessary. The next thing he helped me see was that my grandfather and my uncles were firefighters. And he said, look at the fire department. He said, their, quote, common enemy is an energy. So that energy is an energy we need for life. And he said, they're not there to destroy it. They're there to put it out, basically, when it gets out of balance. And he said, as a police officer, I don't trust your mother, I don't trust anyone, because my life, I survive by not trusting one, because someone at any moment basically take me out. He said, firefighters, they live by trusting each other and their brothers. And so he said, it's a totally different come from. And when you're in that position, you learn to work as a team. And that kind of guided me at a very early age. I literally quit the police department that next day, and I joined the fire department. And that was what I came into. And where I'm at now, just that we could go into, I'll just give you a little bit of the nutshell, was the system. And so actually, I'm going to pause there, just see if there's any questions or any comments on that. You're muted.
Why don't you just go a little bit more into the whole plan you have, and then I think there'll be some questions.
Okay.
But there's something called fair economy. Somebody comment NESARA.
Yes.
I'm going to comments. Yeah, go ahead. So
I'm going to give you the energetics here. So as I stated before, is the world kind of, we can all agree, is metaphorically burning. It's going through this, this crisis that's into a birth, and something new is going to emerge. Well, I believe we can draw from the fire service and the models that are used there for this process. And an example of this is what in Sacramento, I worked for Sacramento Fire first, and then I worked for Seattle Fire Department for my last 16 years and spent 25 years total. And in Sacramento Fire, they taught us what they called Sacramento Fire's dirty little secret. And one instructor taught us one day, and we were all like, it's a sex scandal, it's something, but it's a key. I think it's a golden key to the time we're going through right now. And what that was it was the Great Fire of Sacramento. To this day, the general public has been told that Great Fire happened because they weren't able to get enough fire trucks there in time. They were all volunteers. They didn't have the money they needed to be able to be an effective fire department. And it was late at night, blah, blah, blah. A lot of reasons that were told back when that happened. And in that fire, half the city burned down, 120 plus people died. It was a major disaster. But if the truth of that is, it was the model they were in. And so what that model was those back then, it was 1852. And at that time, those fire companies, so imagine 8 firehouses in old Sacramento at that time, they were responsible, like our nonprofits and our for-profits today. They were responsible for their own funding, their own resources, their own recruiting, their own training, their own everything. And because they didn't have enough money to pay their volunteers, those men had to work other jobs. So their full-time jobs were somewhere else. And they only would come when the bell went off. They'd have to leave their job and make it back to the station. So what happened was the insurance companies realized this model wasn't working. And they stepped in and they said, okay, this isn't working the way we're doing it, but we have an idea. And their idea was, we're going to offer rewards. And so it was called the reward system. And that reward was not for being first to the fire. What that reward was for, they said, we don't have enough money to pay all of you, but we can pay the one who's first water on the fire. So what that did was that incentivized people to train more, to respond quicker, to practice, or to recruit better, all those things, so that they could get the money, just like today's nonprofits with a grant system, just like today's companies with RFPs. It's whoever's showing up, whoever has the first water is who usually gets more funding. And so that was a model. What it did do was it incentivized training and all that. So it had some positive sides to it, but it had one really dark side, kind of like I believe our system does today. And what that was what caused the Great Fire to burn down the city. So on the Great Fire is November 2nd, 1852. And what happened that day was, when that fire happened, it happened at night. So everyone was at home. They were able to respond quicker. So the truth was they did get there in time. But the truth was also that 3 companies arrived almost simultaneously. So when they showed up, they saw the fire. They also knew the reward. They saw the fire mark, and they realized this is a highly insured building, and this is going to be a big reward. So instead of even doing their own thing and trying to beat each other and just be faster, they literally turned on each other, and they fist fought, and they cut each other's hose lines. So they took each other completely out of the fight. And that's what I believe we're doing today. And with what, the nonprofit and the for-profit work that's happening unconsciously. So what came of that was the city realized that if we tell the public what happened, they're going to kill these firefighters because so many people died. So they chose not to say it. But a team emerged, a small team, and what that team did was they evaluated the problem, and they looked at the symptoms of it, and they looked at what they saw as the root cause. And what they identified was these firefighters actually were of service. They wanted to help, but they were in a system that caused them to do this competitive behavior that was really negative. So they came up with a new model. And it's what we know today as the modern fire department, where it was, they basically centralized resources, training center, they centralized, purchasing orders, that type of stuff. And now they built a training center so that these guys could start training each other, their tricks of the trade. And the other big piece they did was they came up with, what's the minimum salary you need to be able to do this? And what they did then at this point was they came up with a hard number. Like, in order to operate a professional fire department, we're going to need this much money. Then they basically came up with a plan. It took many years. And then they created a municipal bond. And with that bond, they were able to raise enough money for this fire department to be operational for the first 3 years without any outside revenue or resources, so they could figure out how to get their stuff together. And what the last thing I'm going to finish with this here is what the chief, that was years later after this transition, he really kind of handed the golden nuggets to this whole thing. And he wrote a letter to the fire department. And part of it was to help relieve the guilt that so many were feeling, because it was never really talked about. And what he said in this letter they gave us in the academy was, he said, there have been instances in the past of this department that would make grown men blush. And he said, so he's talking about that secret and some other ones too, of how that model really basically backfired on them. And he said, but I want you to remember something, that we were not corrupt, we were not incompetent, we were here to serve. And if anything, we had too much of a misguided loyalty, which what he meant by that was our loyalty was to our individual companies and not the greater mission that's here for that we're all here to do. And by that, he said, you could have never, today looking back, you could never imagine the efficiencies and effectiveness that the modern fire department has where we were just a few short years ago. So I believe we're on this edge of landing some new models that put us on the same team so that we can actually put our focus on where it's needed, which I call the seat of the fire, not just me, the fire service. And I believe that's the consciousness, and a lot of things that need a lot more support. That's where we're at. So it's making the shift from a fear-based contraction system to a love. We're all on the same team with the same focus.
Right. No, that is a great example to start with, but there's a factor of greed when we talk about, coming together in a new system. How do we uproot that? But there's also the problem of centralization, where it's all consolidated into one source. But lay it out in terms of the economy and what you think will be the best model to move forward, and then we'll break it apart and see.
Thanks for teeing these up. Yeah, to speak to your first one, if you look at any military, police, or fire especially, because I believe it has a lot more codes for us. One of the things we have to do as professional firefighters is go through a 3 to 4 month academy. And one of the reasons we're doing that is to de-pattern. The acronym I use now that I saw as what was happening is SACRED. And SA is shadow awareness. So we have to become aware of the shadow and our own shadow inside us that's preventing us from collaborating at a much deeper level. And then CR is conscious repatterning, which is, to me, is new habits. We have to land habits that are team habits and not individual habits. And when we do those two things, now we can have enlightened disruption, which means totally changing the system. So that academy, we go through, much of that academy is to de-pattern us from the competitive model that we have and the way we were raised and everything else. And then we're given habits that are very deliberate so that when we go to work together, it's habit. And the fire service learned that a long time ago. If we have to think about it, we're dead. So it has to be habit. So part of the work I'm doing now is landing a model, which we now call, instead of the guild, which was on there, but I'm calling it One Core, which is like the Peace Corps, so that we could go through 3 to 4 months of training to de-pattern, repattern. And now that's the initiation. And then when you speak of the sharing and centralizing resources, I'm not talking about that as centralizing globally or anything else. So the fire department has a model where it's all locally based. So our fire departments are all local, and we have a system that's called the Incident Command System that allows us to interoperate. We're adapting that. We're calling it the Unified Coordination System. So we're taking elements of that, but now we can come together as locals. So what this does is it helps the shadow, us be in right relationship with the shadow, because I'm sure you're well aware of this too, that the larger an organization or the more centralized, the larger the shadow. Every organization has one. So if we can start developing where we have distributed organizations that have the same operating system, now we can only come together in our power when it's something we're all aligned with. So no one organization becomes this dominant force that can crush the others.
And I think the firefighters is a great example. That and football players, if I can say, are the two that really, they need to work together. And so if they can be the model for the rest of the world and for all the other organizational situations, I think it's a great model. Because anyway, at this point though, I think people are really altruistic. They really do want to do good things. But it sounds like we've been patterned or controlled or monitored to be really more at odds with each other. What's your main thing to say about shifting that reality? How do we get into that teamwork? How do we get into that unity?
To me, it's a consciousness shift, because if I'm blaming someone else, so if I'm in the red and blue and saying Trump this or Biden this or any of that, I'm blaming and I'm giving my power away to someone else. So first step for us to be aware of that. If I'm blaming, like to me, this is a systems problem. It's not a people problem. So many people want to say it's evil and they're dumb, they're this, they don't understand. This is the system is making this behavior come to the top. So if we can own that this is a systems problem, now we can be on the same team, red or blue, whatever it is, going, our system is broken. I can only help change the system if I take total responsibility for it and not blame anyone else. Now we have a chance to be on the same team. And if I hold that energy and I don't blame you, when you show up, you start seeing that too, or the other, we start doing that together, and together we start seeing the problem. It's like at a fire, we literally we'll have brief discussions on tactics as we're responding or seeing, but we're not in full debate going, oh, engine 2 sucks, that whole thing. It's like, but there's a fire here that we need to deal with. And we call it when the bunking gear, what we used to call in our crew is when the bunking gear appears, which means our protective gear, everything else disappears. Meaning when we have a mission larger than us, let all that bullshit go. We've got shit to do. So sorry for my.
No, it's great. So how do we apply it to economics, even food supply chains, even inner city problems? I mean, it's a huge system that we have to change.
It's a huge system. And for me, I think it's a hybrid model is what we're modeling. So when I worked as a firefighter, I had my base needs met as a salary, retirement, and all that. I also had 20 plus days a month off because we worked 24-hour shifts. So I went into real estate. I was able to work 2 different careers and blend those. So what I'm seeing as a model, like what we're calling One Core, is if you're willing to serve your local community, help produce the food, help if your gift is in social, healing or whatever it is, bring that, whatever you want to bring. If you can show up without asking for anything in return, other than you're part of that community that now helps each other meet their needs. So if we stay in a system that's tax-based completely, that's where the energy suck is. But we need those taxes because the community is not stepping up enough to take care of the community. So it's like if I'm showing up and I'm willing to be there for my brothers and sisters, now, like in the fire service, just to give you a grounded example, by being of service, having gone through an initiation, those other firefighters are like brothers and sisters. So when I needed work done around my house or a car fixed or whatever it was, we would do it for each other and we wouldn't charge each other. It was just, that's what we did for each other. So now we're meeting like 90% plus of our needs with no money even being exchanged because we're so deep in service together and we trust each other. And now everything else is spending money. So like the more we can see that we're on the same team and embody it and serve, and I believe being on the same team comes from being in service together. If we're just saying we're in the same team, that doesn't mean much to me until I see you serving with me.
Well, that starts with education. It starts in school systems. It starts at the elementary level where we have to taught to be on, instead of dividing a classroom into two teams, unify them into a common cause. I mean, it's so bad. How do we get there?
No, I agree. Education system is really mostly learning of information and facts. It needs to be much more involved in functioning together. I mean, right now we only have like physical ed gets you together practically, or maybe the music department, which is getting cut from funding.
Yes. So have you talked to schools? Have you gone into educational centers? Have you gone into these areas?
We're not at that level yet where I'm in Boulder right now. So we're landing a model here and we're staying pretty, I would say low profile. We're staying right now, but we do have connections with the city, and COVID's really brought that forward with us. And so we have a different opinion of what's happening with COVID than the city does, but that's really the challenge now. How do we find that common ground and see that we're on the same team? So it's what we have right now going as a farm, and we have a farm stand, we have a community base. So we have like the key elements that are needed to be of service and to start taking care of our own needs. So we're still in the early phases, but right now everyone's showing up just in service, which is really incredible.
Well, how can people show up more? I mean, can you tell us like how to get in touch with your organization, how people can volunteer, how can they add their own ideas, create
to their own community. I know here there's a great service of food supply to people. They don't even have to be registered as, you know, poverty level or anything like that. There's organizations that just provide food. Yeah, it's incredible. Good food too.
Really?
Yeah, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, like I said, we're staying pretty low profile. The Boulder site is oneboulder.one, so one Boulder.one. And that's really a brand new site. It's not where we want it to be yet. You can also email me directly if you go to I just have a landing page up to get a hold of me. It's just Erik Lawyer, ERIK lawyer.com. And then you can email me there. But what we do, we are working with other groups that are kind of doing the same thing and sharing ideas, but we're still, like I said, in such the early phase that getting the message out there is we're still in that incubation period, I guess is what we call it right now.
So what's the best thing you want people to take away from this presentation? Like, how can they start to think about changing systems the way you presented it here?
That's a great question. First, just being self-aware, like, are they blaming someone else in their community or this country for the problems that we have? If that's the first place to start, and start doing that inner work that's needed to see that I'm the only one, you're the only one that can change this. Second is securing basic needs. So, you know, my background also, which we didn't talk about, was I was the founder of Firefighters for 9/11 Truth. So I went deep into the control systems and I developed some deep relationships there. One of the key ways to control a population is to control their food supply, their health supply, and their education. So if the more we can start regaining our own food sovereignty, one of the things we're promoting to our group, and we're supporting each other, is growing our distributed gardens. So we don't want just central, we have a farm that we share, but also growing at your own house. And so the more people can do that, the other big one I believe is and COVID's helping with this, is getting to know your neighbors. Because I've been on enough large scale disasters that's who you actually really can depend on in a disaster, not the fire or police or anyone else. And so building those it's about consciousness, relationships, and getting your basic needs secured at a local level. Those are the things we need to focus on first.
Great. No, this is all really great information. So your next step, but also before we get to, as we wrap up here, what's your vision of a world that functions on this level? How does it look, the big picture of this?
The big picture is we're lit up. So it's soul purpose activation, that we're literally taking responsibility for the soul health of every person on this planet and support them in finding, you know, their soul's calling and developing that. So we are actually contributing at a community level to our own basic needs and each other. So now we're like a family. I've been in the fire service, and that feeling, there's nothing like it. When I retired, I felt like I'd been ripped out of the matrix in a way, like, whoa, I'm on my own. So I see a world where we're so on the same team. And when we come into, like right now, people go to parties, they do whatever, and it's meaningless to me because it's just a party for party's sake. But if we just basically overcame a massive challenge together, now we have a party, that feeling of connection and celebration is so much deeper. So I see this world of where we're just living our passion, and when challenges come up, it's boom, we do it together, and then we're celebrating life, and the food and everything that we have is going to be so far beyond what we can even imagine.
You know, I feel a lot of young people are doing that. They don't want to go into jobs which they consider meaningless, but still it's hard to survive. So I think your model of, you know, let them do what they feel they really can help society for, and then hopefully they have enough basis behind them to be able to continue to do that. And many of them are, as you know, trying it. They're really trying. And we weren't, maybe my generation was really just go get that job, make money, have your kids. But you know, I think things are really changing and shifting more to what you're talking about. And I really hope that people can make a difference and really fulfill their own purpose in life. I think everyone's here right now for a key purpose, because there's a lot of need on this planet right now.
Well, it has to change. We are down to the wire, and we've been confronted with a situation that is forcing the system to change. So we need models like you're presenting, Erik, in order to create this new foundation, a new platform of how we can all work together. Ubuntu is another one, and there's so many different people thinking along the same lines.
But we do feel being of service is important. People really need to shift from the I to the we, and that's a key thing. And if not, we were talking with someone, Grant Kramer, who's been on the show several times this weekend. He said, if not, we're down the toilet. I love that expression, because people really have to see that.
We are down to the wire. Yeah, so we are hitting rock bottom. So any final words, anything you want to just leave us with?
Well, just that what you just said, the service, like if people, even from a selfish standpoint, it's so enlivening to be of service with a team that's really dialed in together like that. There's nothing to me better in life than that, and that love and bond that comes from that. And it's, yeah, making the shift from fear to love, like just that perspective of it's a fear-based system we're living in. We're just making the transition to a love-based system. And the more we can model and embody that, the easier it's going to be for all of us.